The envelope wasn't supposed to be mine. I noticed it immediately when I grabbed the mail from our dented mailbox. My name, Luna Blackwood, printed in that sterile bank font across cream-colored paper that usually meant nothing good. My hands trembled as I tore it open, standing barefoot on our front porch while autumn leaves scattered around my feet like discarded dreams. Account balance, $247.33. I read the number 3 times, each glance hitting me like a physical blow. $40,000. $40,000 I'd saved since I was 14, working doubles at the diner, babysitting the Henderson twins, selling handmade jewelry at craft fairs. 4 years of my life reduced to pocket change. The transaction history told the story in cold, clinical detail. Wire transfer, $39,752.67. Recipient, Sandals Resort International. The date was last Tuesday, 3 days ago. The same day my sister Iris had posted those glowing honeymoon photos from Jamaica, her perfect smile gleaming against crystal blue waters, while her new husband Marcus held her close. My vision blurred. The porch seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Luna? What's wrong, sweetheart? Mom appeared in the doorway, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. Sarah Blackwood, 52 years old, with graying brown hair always pulled back in that same practical bun, and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many years pretending everything was fine. She took one look at my face, then at the bank statement clutched in my white-knuckled grip, and her expression shifted from concern to something that looked suspiciously like guilt. "Oh," she said quietly, "that came here instead of your apartment. Instead of her apartment." As if the address was the problem. As if the fact that they'd stolen my entire future was just a minor clerical error. "Mom," my voice came out barely above a whisper. "What did you do?" She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped onto the porch and closed the front door behind her. The October wind cut through my oversized sweater, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe properly. "We were going to tell you," she began, her words careful and measured like she was diffusing a bomb. "Your father and we had a family meeting planned. You stole from me." The words erupted from somewhere deep in my chest, raw and jagged. "You stole $40,000 from me." "We didn't steal anything." Her voice sharpened, defensive. "We borrowed it. We're going to pay you back every penny as soon as you sent my college money to a resort in Jamaica." I waved the statement at her, my voice rising to match the fury building in my chest. "Iris got married 3 months ago. The honeymoon is over. That money is gone." Mom's face crumpled slightly, but she straightened her shoulders in that way she did when she was about to deliver one of her lectures about family responsibility and sacrifice. "Luna, honey, you have to understand. Iris needed this. After everything she's been through with the wedding stress and Marcus's family situation, they deserved a proper honeymoon, a chance to start their marriage right." "What about my chance to start my life right?" I was shouting now, not caring if the neighbors heard. "What about the 4 years I spent working myself into the ground while Iris partied through community college? What about my acceptance to Northwestern? Classes start in January. There are student loans. I didn't want student loans." I crumpled the bank statement in my fist. "That's why I saved every penny for 4 years. That's why I worked 60-hour weeks last summer while Iris planned her fairy tale wedding. That was my money, Mom. Mine." She reached for me, her face soft with what looked like pity. "Sweetheart, I know you're disappointed." I jerked away from her touch. "Disappointed? You think I'm disappointed?" I laughed, a harsh sound that didn't belong to me. "I'm devastated. You've destroyed everything I worked for. You're being dramatic." Dad's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Robert Blackwood stood in the doorway, his work shirt stained with grease from the auto shop, his gray eyes hard as winter stones. "It's just money, Luna. Family is what matters. Just money. 4 years of my life reduced to just money." "Iris is family too," Mom added, her voice gaining strength from Dad's presence. "She's your sister. We thought you'd understand that sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the people we love." I stared at them. These 2 people who'd raised me, who'd taught me about hard work and saving and responsibility, and felt something fundamental shift inside me, like a foundation cracking under pressure I'd never noticed building. "Did you ask her to sacrifice for me?" The question came out quiet, deadly calm. "When I needed school clothes or money for field trips or help with my car repairs, did you ever ask your precious Iris to give up anything for her little sister?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "We'll pay you back," Dad said finally, his jaw tight. "Stop being so selfish." Selfish. The word hit me like a slap. I looked at these people, my parents, and saw strangers. People who could watch me work myself to exhaustion for years, could watch me carefully budget every dollar and plan every detail of my future, and then casually hand it all away to fund someone else's vacation. People who could call me selfish for wanting to keep money I'd earned. I need that money back, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. All of it. By January. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, one of those married couple communications that happened in glances and micro-expressions. That's not realistic, Luna, Dad said. The shop's been slow and we've got the mortgage. Then you shouldn't have spent money that wasn't yours. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing on the porch with their excuses, and their guilt, and their twisted logic about family sacrifice. My hands shook as I got into my car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic with more rust than paint, bought with money I'd earned and saved myself. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror, still standing there, watching me leave. Mom had her arm around Dad's waist, and they looked like what they'd always looked like, a united front, a team. It just took me 21 years to realize I'd never been part of that team. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to the overlook above Miller's Pond and sat in my car until dawn, staring at the water and trying to understand how my parents could sleep peacefully after what they'd done. My phone buzzed constantly, texts from Mom, calls from Dad, even a message from Iris asking if everything was okay. I deleted them all without reading. When I finally returned to my studio apartment the next morning, they were waiting for me. Dad sat at my tiny kitchen table like he owned the place, his thick fingers wrapped around a coffee mug I didn't remember offering him. Mom stood by my window, her reflection ghost-like in the glass, wearing that same guilty expression from yesterday. They'd let themselves in with the spare key I'd given them for emergencies. Apparently, my financial ruin didn't qualify as an emergency, but their need for damage control did. We need to talk, Dad said without preamble. I think we covered everything yesterday. I dropped my keys on the counter with more force than necessary. You stole my money. I want it back. The end. We did not steal anything. Mom turned from the window, her voice sharp with maternal authority. We made a decision as a family. I wasn't consulted. Because you would have said no, Dad interjected. And sometimes, Luna, the right thing isn't the easy thing. I stared at him. This man who'd taught me to change my own oil and balance a checkbook, who'd lectured me about the importance of financial responsibility since I was old enough to count coins. The right thing was using my money to send Iris on vacation. It wasn't just a vacation. Mom moved closer, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. Iris has been struggling, sweetheart. The wedding planning was so stressful. And then Marcus's mother made all those horrible comments about the budget. So you fixed it by stealing from me. Stop saying that word. Dad's voice carried the edge of real anger now. We borrowed it. We're going to pay you back. With what money? I laughed bitterly. Mom works part-time at the library. You've been complaining about slow business at the shop for months. Where exactly is $40,000 going to come from? They exchanged another one of those looks. This time I caught something else in it. Panic. We'll figure it out, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe we can take out a loan. Against what collateral? The house you're still paying off? The shop that's barely breaking even? Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping against my hardwood floor. You know what, Luna? I'm getting tired of your attitude. We raised you. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. We never asked for anything in return. You never had to ask. I gave you everything. My voice broke slightly. I gave you my childhood, working to help with bills. I gave you my teenage years, babysitting and cleaning to contribute to this family, and now you've taken my future. We gave Iris a chance at happiness. Mom's words were quiet but firm. She deserves that much after everything she's been through. Everything she's been through. The phrase hung in the air like smoke, acrid and stifling. Everything my perfect sister had been through, like being the favorite child, was such a tremendous burden. What about everything I've been through? I asked. What about watching you pay for her car while I saved for months to buy my own? What about seeing you cover her credit card debt while lecturing me about financial responsibility? What about working 3 jobs while she got to focus on finding herself in community college? That's different, Dad said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. How? How is it different? Because Iris needed more help, Mom said simply. She's always struggled more than you. You're strong, Luna. You're independent. You figure things out. Iris, she needs taking care of. The words hit me like a physical blow. 21 years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need help, and this was my reward, to be strong enough to have my dreams stolen without complaint. So, because I worked hard and saved money, I deserve to lose it? You deserve to understand that sometimes we make sacrifices for family. Dad's tone had shifted to that patronizing register he used when he thought he was teaching me a life lesson. Iris is happy now. She and Marcus are starting their life together with good memories instead of stress and debt. Isn't that worth something? Not $40,000 of my money. No. Mom sat down heavily in the chair Dad had vacated. Luna, we thought you'd be happy for her. We thought you'd want to help. If you'd asked me, I might have given her some money for the honeymoon. Some. Not my entire college fund. Would you have? Dad challenged. Really? Or would you have made excuses about needing it for school? The question revealed everything I needed to know about how they saw me. Not as a daughter with dreams and goals, but as a selfish obstacle to their favorite child's happiness. It was my money, I said quietly. I earned it. I saved it. It was mine to decide what to do with. And now you're acting like we committed some terrible crime, Mom said, her voice rising with frustration. We're family, Luna. Families help each other. No, I corrected. Some family members help other family members. Some family members get helped. I know which category I'm in. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making Mom jump. Enough. You're acting like a spoiled brat. We did what we thought was best for this family, and instead of being grateful that your sister is happy, you're throwing a tantrum. Grateful. There it was. The word that had been lurking beneath the surface of this entire conversation. You want me to be grateful that you destroyed my future? I want you to be grateful that you come from a family that cares about each other, he shot back. Iris would have done the same for you. But even as he said it, we all knew it wasn't true. Iris had never sacrificed anything for anyone. That wasn't her role in this family dynamic. Her role was to be protected. Mine was to do the protecting. Get out, I said quietly. Luna, Mom started. Get out of my apartment. They left, but not before Dad turned at the door and delivered one final blow. When you're ready to stop being selfish and start being a sister, you know where to find us. After they were gone, I sat in my kitchen and stared at the mug Dad had been drinking from. It was chipped along the handle, a flaw I'd never noticed before. Just like my family, just like me. Iris called that afternoon while I was researching student loan options, my laptop screen filled with interest rates and deferment policies that made my stomach churn. Her contact photo popped up, all white teeth and honey blonde highlights taken during her engagement party last spring, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but 21 years of conditioning won out. I answered. Luna? Oh my God, thank goodness. Her voice carried that breathless quality she'd perfected in high school, the one that made teachers excuse her late assignments and boyfriends fight over who got to carry her books. Mom called and said you're upset about something? I don't really understand what's going on. Of course she didn't understand. Understanding required acknowledging that other people had problems worth considering. They used my college savings to pay for your honeymoon, I said, without preamble. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of ice clinking in what I assumed was her signature cocktail, some complicated thing with elderflower liqueur that she'd discovered at a wine bar in the city. Oh, she finally said, her voice smaller. Oh, Luna, I had no idea. I mean, Marcus and I were wondering how Mom and Dad could suddenly afford to. But they said it was a wedding gift, and we just thought. You thought what? That they'd suddenly come into $40,000? I don't know what I thought. She sounded genuinely confused, which somehow made it worse. Iris had gone through life never questioning the good fortune that seemed to fall into her lap, because she'd never had to. Luna, I'm so sorry. I would never have accepted it if I'd known where the money came from. Would she? I wanted to believe her, but Iris had a talent for selective moral outrage, upset about abstract injustices while remaining oblivious to the concrete ones happening right in front of her. But you did know the family didn't have that kind of money lying around, I pressed. You knew Mom and Dad have been struggling financially. Another pause. I guess I didn't think about it that hard. They seemed so excited to give us this gift. And after all the stress with the wedding, she trailed off, perhaps realizing how that sounded. After all the stress of the wedding, as if planning a party was comparable to having your future stolen. Iris, I need that money back. All of it. I start at Northwestern in January. Northwestern. Her voice pitched higher with surprise. Since when are you going to Northwestern? The question hit me like a slap. My acceptance letter had been hanging on my refrigerator for 8 months. I'd texted her a photo the day it arrived. But of course she didn't remember. My achievements were just background noise in the symphony of her own life, since I got accepted with a partial academic scholarship. The scholarship that requires me to have the rest of the tuition covered through savings or loans. That's amazing, Luna. I had no idea you were such a good student. I closed my eyes and counted to 5. She wasn't trying to be hurtful. That was the worst part about Iris. Her self-absorption was so complete it was almost innocent. She genuinely didn't realize that she'd never bothered to learn anything about my life beyond the surface details. I've been working toward this for 4 years, I said carefully. The money your honeymoon cost was supposed to cover my first 2 years of tuition. Oh God, I heard her set down her glass. Luna, I feel terrible. What can we do? How can we fix this? For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe she really was sorry. Maybe she'd find a way to make this right. Can you and Marcus pay it back? I asked. Even half of it? The silence that followed was different this time. Heavier, more calculating. Well, we just bought the condo, she said slowly. And Marcus's residency doesn't pay very much. And we've got my student loans to pay off, and the car payments. Each excuse felt like another door slamming shut. We put everything into the down payment on the condo, she continued, her voice gaining momentum as she warmed to her justification. And honestly, with Marcus's schedule at the hospital, I don't know when I'll be able to go back to work. Maybe in a few years, once he's established in his practice. A few years. She was talking about a few years while my life crumbled around me today. What about the honeymoon? I asked. Could you return any of it? Get a partial refund? Luna. Her voice carried a note of gentle reproach, as if I were being unreasonable. The honeymoon was 3 weeks ago. You can't just return a vacation. You could try. It doesn't work like that. Besides, it was so important for Marcus and me to have that time together. His mother had been so awful about the wedding budget, making all these snide comments about how we were living beyond our means. The honeymoon proved we could have nice things too. There it was, the core of Iris's worldview. She deserved nice things, and other people existed to make sure she got them. The fact that those nice things came at the cost of my dreams was just an unfortunate side effect. So you won't help, I said. I can't help, she corrected. Luna, you have to understand our position. We're just starting out, and Marcus has such high expectations for his career, and I need to be supportive. What about being supportive of your sister? I am being supportive. I feel terrible about this whole situation, but what's done is done, and we have to be practical. You're smart. You'll figure out another way to pay for college. You always figure things out. You always figure things out. The same words Mom had used yesterday, delivered with the same tone of casual dismissal, as if my ability to solve problems meant I deserved to have them dumped on me. Iris, I said quietly, do you remember when we were kids and I saved up for months to buy that easel? For my art supplies? Not really. I was 12. I worked extra chores for neighbors, saved every allowance dollar. It took me 6 months to save $60 for this easel I'd seen at the art store. And the day I finally had enough money, Mom said she needed it to pay for your dance camp registration. Oh, her voice was small. I think I remember that. You got to go to dance camp. I never got the easel. And when I was upset about it, Dad told me I should be happy that I could help my little sister achieve her dreams. Luna, that was years ago. It wasn't years ago. It was the first time. The first time I learned that my wants mattered less than yours. And I kept learning that lesson over and over for the next 9 years. She was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing. But they weren't tears of understanding or guilt. They were the tears of someone who'd been made to feel bad about something she couldn't change. What do you want me to say? She whispered. That I'm sorry for being born. That I'm sorry Mom and Dad loved me. I want you to acknowledge what it cost me to be your sister. The line went quiet, except for her sniffling. Luna, I love you, she said finally. You're my big sister, and I've always looked up to you. You're so strong and capable and independent. I know this seems unfair, but maybe this is an opportunity to show everyone how resilient you are. An opportunity. My stolen future was an opportunity to prove my resilience. I hung up without saying goodbye. 3 days of silence. 3 days of me researching private loans with crushing interest rates, calling Northwestern's financial aid office to explain my situation, and watching my carefully constructed future dissolve like sugar in rain. 3 days of my parents and Iris, pretending the problem would solve itself if they ignored it long enough. Then, at 7:43 a.m. on Thursday morning, my phone exploded with sound. Dad's name flashed on the screen, but the voice that came through when I answered wasn't the controlled, patronizing tone he'd used in my apartment. This was raw panic wrapped in fury. Luna, you have to come home right now. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee mug halfway to my lips. Dad? What's wrong? They took the car. His voice cracked. They fucking took our car. I'd never heard my father use that word. Not once in 21 years. Robert Blackwood was a man who said darn when he hit his thumb with a hammer and son of a gun when traffic was bad. Hearing him break down into profanity was like watching a building collapse. What car? Who took it? The bank. The goddamn bank sent a repo man to the house. At 7 in the morning, Luna. 7 in the morning. And this guy with a tow truck is hooking up the Honda while the neighbors watch from their windows. The Honda. Their 2019 Honda Accord that Dad had been so proud of when they bought it. He'd spent weeks researching models, comparing interest rates, negotiating with dealers. It was the first new car they'd owned since I was born. Dad, I don't understand. Why would they repossess? Because we're 3 months behind on payments. The words came out in a rush. 3 fucking months. And they won't work with us anymore. The shop's been slow, and we had some unexpected expenses, and now, he made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. Now your mother can't get to work, and I can't get to the shop, and it's all falling apart. Unexpected expenses. My brain, sharp with exhaustion and stress, made the connection immediately. The honeymoon was an unexpected expense. Silence stretched between us, broken only by his labored breathing. Dad, you used my college money to pay for Iris's honeymoon while you were behind on car payments? It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I was shouting now, standing in my tiny kitchen in my pajamas, shouting at the man who'd raised me to be responsible and practical and careful with money. You were already in financial trouble, and instead of dealing with it, you stole $40,000 from your daughter to fund a vacation. We thought we could catch up. His voice was smaller now, defeated. The shop was supposed to get that big contract from the county, and Marcus said he might be able to help with some money from his signing bonus, and we just thought. They gambled with my future because they thought everything would work out fine. Where's Mom? She's in the bedroom, crying. She keeps saying it's her fault because she's the one who suggested using your money for the honeymoon. Of course it was Mom's idea. Sweet, selfless Sarah Blackwood, who'd spent 21 years teaching me that good daughters sacrifice for their families. She'd finally found a way to teach me that lesson one more time. You have to come home, Luna. Dad's voice turned pleading. We need to figure this out together. As a family, I'm not coming home. Luna, please. No. The word came out harder than I'd intended. You made this choice without consulting me. You deal with the consequences without my help. You can't mean that, but I did mean it. For the first time in my life, I meant it completely. Did you call Iris? I asked. Did you ask your golden child to come home and figure this out as a family? Another silence. Longer this time. Iris has her own life now, he said finally. She can't be expected to drop everything, but I can. That's different. No, it's not. It's never been different. You just told yourselves it was different so you could sleep at night. I heard him take a shaky breath. Luna, I know you're angry, but we're still your parents. You need to call a credit counseling service. You need to talk to your bank about loan modification. You need to figure out public transportation or carpooling until you can afford another car. You need to act like adults instead of expecting your daughter to fix everything. We can't do this alone. The admission hung between us like a bridge I could choose to cross or burn. You're not alone, I said quietly. You have each other. You have Iris and Marcus. You have the life you chose when you decided my dreams were less important than everyone else's comfort. Luna, I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off. For the next hour, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the Northwestern packet I'd been carrying around like a talisman for months. The course catalog, the campus map, the letter confirming my enrollment pending final financial verification. I'd read through it so many times I'd memorized the layout of the student center, the requirements for my major, the professor profiles for classes I'd planned to take. All of it meaningless now. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Financial Aid Office, Northwestern University. Subject, urgent, final documentation required. I deleted it without reading it. Then I opened a new browser window and searched for apartment rentals in other cities, places where nobody knew me as the responsible daughter, the reliable sister, the one who always figured things out, places where I could disappear and become someone else entirely, someone who put herself first. The phone calls continued throughout the day. 17 missed calls from Dad, 12 from Mom, 3 from Iris. I left the phone off and spent the afternoon cleaning my apartment with the methodical precision of someone preparing for a long journey. By evening, I'd made a decision. If my family wanted to treat me like a stranger, I'd give them what they wanted. I'd become one. I didn't leave town that weekend like I'd planned. Instead, I found myself driving past the house where I'd grown up, a modest 2-story colonial with faded blue shutters and a front yard that Dad had given up trying to maintain years ago. Their driveway was conspicuously empty, just an oil stain where the Honda used to park. The sight should have given me satisfaction, justice served, but all I felt was hollow. I parked across the street and found myself remembering things I'd tried to forget. The summer I was 15 and worked at the ice cream parlor while Iris went to cheerleading camp. The Christmas when I was 17 and asked for a laptop for college applications, only to watch Mom and Dad give Iris a car for her senior year, they'd said, as if being a senior was an achievement worthy of $5,000. The pattern had always been there. I'd just been too young, too hopeful, too conditioned to see it clearly. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Luna, it's Marcus. Can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding about the honeymoon situation. Marcus Chen, Iris's husband of 3 months, resident physician at St. Mary's, and the newest member of our dysfunction. I'd liked him when they first started dating 2 years ago. He was quiet and thoughtful, seemed genuinely kind. But marriage to Iris had a way of reshaping people's priorities. I called the number. Luna, thank God." His voice carried the exhausted edge of someone pulling 36-hour shifts at the hospital. "Iris is a wreck. She's been crying since you hung up on her yesterday. She's crying because she feels guilty or because she might have to face consequences. That's not fair, isn't it?" I watched a neighbor walk their dog past my parents' house, both of them glancing at the empty driveway with the careful curiosity of suburbanites witnessing someone else's downfall. "Marcus, did you know where the honeymoon money came from?" A pause. "Not exactly. What does that mean?" "I knew your parents were paying for it, and I knew they didn't usually have that kind of money available. But when I asked Iris about it, she said they'd been saving up as a wedding gift. And you believe that?" I wanted to believe it. His honesty surprised me. "Look, Luna, my parents paid for our entire wedding because they said Iris's family couldn't afford to contribute. It was awkward, embarrassing for Iris. When your parents offered to cover the honeymoon, it felt like a way for her family to participate in something significant. So you took $40,000 from people you knew couldn't afford it to make your wife feel better? When you put it like that, it sounds terrible." "Because it is terrible." Another pause. "What do you want us to do? We can't undo the trip. You could acknowledge that it was wrong. You could stop making excuses. You could find a way to help pay me back. Luna, we're not in a position to—" "Right, you're not in a position to help, but you were in a position to take." I leaned back in my car seat, watching clouds gather over the house where I'd learned all my hardest lessons. "Tell me something, Marcus. When you and Iris talk about family finances, do you ever mention the $40,000 that your lifestyle cost someone else? It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple. You went on vacation with my money. My college fund is gone because you and my sister decided you deserved a honeymoon at Sandals Resort. Iris didn't know it was your money, but you suspected." Silence. "You suspected," I continued. "And you took it anyway because taking it was easier than asking questions. Just like my parents giving it was easier than telling Iris no. Luna, I'm calling because I want to make this right. How? I don't know yet. But maybe we could work out a payment plan. Over how many years? 5? 10? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Marcus, I needed that money in January, not in 5 years when it's convenient for you to pay it back. I understand that, but do you? Do you understand that while you and Iris were sipping cocktails on the beach, I was calculating whether I could afford to eat anything besides ramen for the next 4 years? Do you understand that your vacation cost me my future?" "You'll find another way," he said, and I heard the echo of every family member who'd ever dismissed my problems. "People get student loans all the time. People get student loans when they don't have parents who steal their savings. They didn't steal—" "Stop." My voice came out sharp enough to cut glass. "Just stop defending it. You know it was wrong. Iris knows it was wrong. My parents know it was wrong. The fact that everyone's too comfortable to admit it doesn't make it right." I heard him take a deep breath. "What do you want from us, Luna?" "I want you to care more about my future than your comfort. I want my sister to love me enough to sacrifice something for me for once in her life. I want my parents to choose my dreams over her wants. And if we can't do that," the question hung in the air like smoke, "if they couldn't choose me, even once, even after taking everything I'd worked for, then I want you to leave me alone," I said quietly. "All of you. I want you to stop calling and texting and pretending this is something we can just work through as a family, because families don't do this to each other. Luna." I ended the call and turned off my phone. Across the street, the house I'd grown up in sat empty and dark. No cars in the driveway, no lights in the windows. It looked exactly like what it had always been. A place where one daughter's dreams went to die so another daughter's could flourish. I started my car and drove away, leaving the ghosts of my childhood behind me. This time, I didn't look back. The loan officer at First National had the kind of patient smile that meant bad news was coming. "Miss Blackwood, I've reviewed your application, and unfortunately, without a cosigner or significant collateral, we can't approve you for the amount you're requesting. Janet Morrison, according to her nameplate, was probably Mom's age, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the gentle demeanor of someone who'd delivered disappointing news to desperate people countless times. What if I put up my car as collateral? I leaned forward in the uncomfortable chair, my hands clasped tight to stop them from shaking. It's paid off. It's worth about $8,000. That would help with a smaller loan, but you're asking for $38,000. The risk is too high for an unsecured loan of that size, especially for someone with limited credit history. $38,000. The gap between what I had left and what I needed for Northwestern. A number that had been growing larger in my mind for the past week, like a tumor feeding on my dreams. What about with a co-signer? Her expression softened with something that might have been pity. Do you have a family member with good credit who'd be willing to co-sign? I almost laughed. The people with good credit in my family were the same people who'd created this problem. Not really. I'm sorry. I wish I could help you more. I walked out of the bank into the October afternoon, my jacket too thin against the wind that cut through downtown Millers Creek. 3 banks. Same answer. My credit was decent for someone my age, but not good enough to borrow enough money to replace what had been stolen from me. My phone had been buzzing all morning with missed calls and texts. I'd started reading them again, a mistake that left me feeling hollowed out and raw. Mom, please come home so we can talk about this like adults. Dad, you're being stubborn. We're family. We work things out. Iris, I can't stop crying. Why won't you call me back? Even Marcus had texted, this is tearing the family apart. Can't we find a compromise? A compromise. As if there was a middle ground between having my future and losing it. I drove to the coffee shop where I'd worked summers during high school, thinking maybe old connections could help. Mrs. Hendricks, the owner, remembered me fondly and offered me 30 hours a week at $12 an hour. Good money for Millers Creek, but even working full-time, it would take me years to save enough for college again. Years I didn't have. Northwestern wouldn't hold my spot indefinitely. The community college had openings for spring semester. In-state tuition was manageable. Even with my depleted savings, I could live at home, work part-time, maybe transfer to a 4-year school eventually. It was the practical choice, the responsible choice, the choice that would put me right back in the family dynamic I was trying to escape. I sat in the parking lot and called Northwestern's financial aid office. Ms. Chen speaking. How can I help you? This is Luna Blackwood. I need to withdraw my enrollment for spring semester. I'm sorry to hear that, Luna. May I ask what changed? I closed my eyes. Family emergency. Financial situation changed unexpectedly. Have you explored all your loan options? Sometimes students think they've exhausted their possibilities when there are still programs available. I've tried everything. What about family assistance? Sometimes relatives can help bridge the gap. My family is the reason I need to withdraw. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. There was a pause on the other end. I see, Ms. Chen said quietly. Well, we can certainly process your withdrawal. But Luna, if your situation changes, please don't hesitate to reach out. Northwestern wants students like you, students like me. High GPA, strong test scores, genuine passion for learning. Students whose families should be proud, should be supportive, should be willing to sacrifice for their daughter's success, instead of the other way around. After I hung up, I sat in my car and cried for the first time since finding that bank statement. Not pretty, controlled tears, but ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. Crying for the acceptance letter I'd carried in my wallet for months. Crying for the dorm room I'd never live in, the classes I'd never take, the life I'd never get to lead. When I was empty of tears, I drove to the apartment complex office. I need to break my lease, I told the manager, a tired-looking woman in her 50s who barely glanced up from her computer. That's a 60-day notice requirement, plus penalties. How much? 2 months' rent, plus a $500 termination fee. I calculated quickly. It would wipe out most of what I had left, but it would free me from the monthly payments, and I was going to need every dollar I could scrape together. I'll take it. She handed me the forms, still not really looking at me, just another young person whose plans had fallen apart. Nothing unusual in Millers Creek, where dreams came to die quietly. That evening, I started packing. Not much to show for 21 years of life. Clothes that fit in 2 suitcases, books that filled 3 boxes, kitchen supplies that wouldn't be worth taking. The furniture was secondhand anyway. I could leave it for the next tenant. My phone rang. Dad's number. For once, I answered. Luna? Thank God. We've been so worried. I withdrew from Northwestern today. Silence. What do you mean, you withdrew? I mean I called the financial aid office and withdrew my enrollment. I won't be starting college in January. Luna, no. No, we can figure this out. We can't figure it out, Dad. There is no we. You made sure of that when you chose Iris over me. That's not what happened. It's exactly what happened. And now I'm choosing me. I hung up and turned off the phone for the last time. Tomorrow I'd start over. Somewhere else. Someone else. Tonight, I'd mourn the daughter I used to be. I broke into my own childhood home on a gray Tuesday morning when I knew my parents would be gone. Dad at the shop, Mom at her library job. I still had my key, so technically it wasn't breaking and entering, but it felt criminal anyway, like trespassing on a life that no longer belonged to me. The house smelled the same. Coffee and vanilla candles and that underlying mustiness that came from old carpet and older secrets. I stood in the entryway for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the grandfather clock Dad had inherited from his father, the creak of floorboards settling under weight they'd carried for 30 years. I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there for practicality. I'd left some of my childhood things in the attic, photo albums, school yearbooks, a few pieces of jewelry my grandmother had given me, things that belonged to me, and only me. The pull-down ladder to the attic groaned under my weight, the same protest it had made since I was 12, and discovered it was the perfect hiding place to read books Mom thought were too mature for me. The air up there was thick and dusty, filled with shadows and the accumulated debris of a family's history. Boxes labeled in Mom's careful handwriting lined the walls. Christmas decorations 1998, Luna's baby clothes, Robert's army stuff, a whole life cataloged and stored away, waiting for some future day when memories would be more valuable than the space they occupied. I found my things quickly, 2 boxes pushed into the far corner, labeled simply, Luna's room. But as I lifted them, something else caught my eye. A metal filing cabinet I'd never noticed before, tucked behind a larger box marked important papers. Important papers. In 21 years of living in this house, I'd never seen my parents access any important papers from the attic. Their current documents lived in the desk downstairs. Insurance policies, tax returns, the mortgage paperwork Dad liked to spread across the kitchen table when he was worried about money. So what was important enough to be stored up here? The filing cabinet was unlocked. The first drawer was full of old medical records, school transcripts, the usual paper trail of family life. But the second drawer made me stop breathing. Bank statements. Dozens of them, going back years, but not from the credit union where my parents did their regular banking. These were from Morrison Trust and Investment, a company I'd never heard of. My hands shook as I opened the first statement. It was from last month, addressed to Robert and Sarah Blackwood. The account balance made my vision blur. $247,993.16. $247,000. I grabbed another statement. The month before, $251,242.33, and another, 6 months ago, $278,109.55. The accounts were joint, both my parents' names on every statement. The balances fluctuated but never dropped below $200,000. There were regular withdrawals, some small, some large. One from 3 weeks ago for $42,000. $42,000, right around the time of Iris's honeymoon. My parents had nearly $250,000 in a secret account, and they'd stolen my college savings to pay for my sister's vacation. I kept digging through the papers, my heart hammering against my ribs. There were investment records, certificates of deposit, dividend statements, a portfolio that showed careful, long-term financial planning, the kind of wealth management that didn't happen by accident. At the bottom of the drawer, I found a folder labeled Trust Documentation. Inside were legal papers that made the world shift beneath my feet. A trust fund, established 23 years ago by someone named Eleanor Blackwood, Dad's mother, who had died when I was 6 months old, a grandmother I'd never really known, whose funeral I was too young to remember. The trust was substantial, over $400,000 when it was established, grown now to nearly 3 times that amount through investments. The beneficiaries were listed clearly, Robert Blackwood and his children, both of them. I read through the legal language with growing disbelief. The trust was designed to provide for education, healthcare, and major life events. College tuition was specifically mentioned as an approved expense. Both children were entitled to equal distributions for educational purposes. Both children. There was more. A letter in my grandmother's handwriting, dated just before her death. Robert, this money is for Luna, and whatever other children you may have. I've seen how hard you and Sarah work, and I want to make sure the grandchildren I'll never see grow up have opportunities you couldn't give them. Use this money wisely. Make sure they both get the education they deserve. I sat on the dusty attic floor, surrounded by the evidence of my parents' lies, and tried to process what I was seeing. They hadn't stolen my college money out of desperation or poor planning. They'd had access to hundreds of thousands of dollars specifically designated for their children's education. They'd had my grandmother's trust fund the entire time, and they'd let me work myself to exhaustion for 4 years, saving every penny for college, while they hoarded money that was legally mine. They'd let me believe we were poor, let me sacrifice and scrimp and plan, while they sat on a fortune that my own grandmother had left for my education. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't breathe properly. This wasn't favoritism or poor judgment. This was systematic deception spanning my entire life. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything. The bank statements, the trust documents, my grandmother's letter, evidence of a lie that had shaped every decision I'd ever made about my future. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and climbed down from the attic. My parents weren't just thieves. They were liars who'd stolen more than my money. They'd stolen my understanding of who I was. I waited for them at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd done homework every night for 12 years, where we'd eaten countless family dinners while I listened to them worry about money that apparently didn't exist. The printed bank statements were spread in front of me like a tarot reading revealing every lie they'd told. 6:47 p.m. Dad's key in the front door, followed by the shuffle of work boots and the rustle of Mom's library bag. Their voices carried down the hallway. Something about dinner plans, about whether they had enough milk for cereal tomorrow. Normal, domestic concerns from people who had nearly $250,000 hidden in secret accounts. "Luna," Mom's voice pitched high with surprise when she saw me. "Honey, what are you doing here?" "I thought, we've been trying to call you." Dad appeared behind her, still in his work clothes, grease under his fingernails and wariness in his eyes. "Luna, this is unexpected. Sit down," I said quietly. They exchanged one of their looks. 23 years of marriage compressed into a glance that said everything they needed to know. This wasn't a reconciliation visit. Mom sat first, her hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. Dad remained standing, his arms crossed over his chest in the defensive posture that meant he was preparing for battle. "I found the trust fund," I said. The color drained from Mom's face. Dad went very still. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I picked up the top bank statement and held it so they could see the account balance. Morrison Trust and Investment. Current balance, $247,193.16. Established by Eleanor Blackwood 23 years ago for the education of her grandchildren. Mom made a small sound, almost like a whimper. "All these years," I continued, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest, "you let me think we were poor. You let me work myself to death saving money for college while you sat on a trust fund worth over $200,000. It's not that simple," Dad said, but he'd deflated slightly, the fight going out of him. "It is exactly that simple." I spread the other statements across the table. "Look at the dates, Dad. Look at the withdrawal amounts. Every time Iris needed something, dance camp, cheerleading uniforms, her car, her wedding, you pulled money from Grandma's trust, money that was supposed to be for both of us. We used some for you too," Mom said weakly. "Your school supplies, your clothes, hundreds of dollars for me, tens of thousands for her." I pulled out the copy of my grandmother's letter. "Do you want me to read what Grandma wrote? About making sure both grandchildren got the education they deserved?" Dad sat down heavily, suddenly looking older than his 54 years. "Luna, you don't understand the whole situation. Then explain it to me." They looked at each other again, and I saw something pass between them that I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. "Your grandmother's will was complicated," Mom said finally. "The trust had conditions." "What conditions?" Dad cleared his throat. "The money was supposed to be distributed equally when both children reached 21, but there were stipulations about bloodline." The word hung in the air like a poison cloud. "What about bloodline?" I asked, though something cold was already spreading through my chest. "Eleanor never approved of our marriage," Dad said quietly. "She thought your mother wasn't good enough for the family. When we told her Sarah was pregnant with you, she was disapproving." "Robert," Mom said sharply. "Don't. She has a right to know." Dad's voice was hollow. "Eleanor wrote the trust to benefit her biological grandchildren. She was very specific about that language." My heart stopped beating for what felt like a full minute. "What are you saying?" "She's saying that when Iris was born 2 years later," Dad continued, his words coming faster now, like a dam breaking, "Eleanor fell in love with her immediately. Iris looked just like me at that age, just like the Blackwood side of the family. You favored your mother. You're both my parents," I said. but my voice sounded strange even to me. Mom was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "Luna, sweetheart, you are our daughter. You've always been our daughter, but not his biological daughter." The silence confirmed what I already knew, what some part of me had perhaps always suspected. The favoritism, the different treatment, the way they talked about Iris, as if she was more precious, more deserving. "Who?" I asked. "It doesn't matter," Mom said. "He's not in the picture. He never was. It matters to me." Dad leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Luna, this changes nothing about how we feel about you. You're my daughter in every way that counts. Except legally, except according to Grandma's trust." I looked down at the bank statements with new understanding. "That's why you never told me about the money, because technically it's all Iris's." "That's not true," Mom said quickly. "We've always treated it as money for both of you." "No, you haven't." The pieces were falling into place now. "You used it for Iris's big expenses and scraped together whatever you could for mine. Because deep down, you knew she had more right to it than I did." "That's not how we saw it," Dad said. "But it's how the law sees it." I stood up, the weight of 21 years of lies pressing down on me. "I'm not Eleanor Blackwood's biological granddaughter, which means I have no legal claim to any of this money." "We could still help you with college," Mom said desperately. "We could take out a loan against the trust." "With what justification?" I laughed, but it came out broken. "I'm not your real daughter, and this isn't my real money. Why would you risk Iris's inheritance for someone who's not even blood?" "Don't say that," Dad's voice cracked. "You are my real daughter, but not in the way that matters, not in the way that gets me a college education." I walked toward the door, leaving the evidence of their lies scattered across the table. "Luna, please," Mom called after me. "Don't leave like this. We can work something out." I turned back to look at them one last time. These people who'd raised me but never quite claimed me, who'd loved me but never quite chosen me. "There's nothing to work out," I said quietly. "You've been protecting Iris's interests all along. Now I'm going to protect mine." I left them sitting at that table, surrounded by the wreckage of our family's foundation. For the first time in my life, I was completely free and completely alone. I was cleaning out my apartment when Iris showed up, unannounced and tear-streaked, clutching a manila envelope like it contained her confession. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the bare living room where boxes marked "donate" and "storage" sat like tombstones for my old life. "Do we?" I taped up another box without looking at her. "Because I think I finally understand everything I need to know about this family." "No, you don't." Her voice was different, smaller, younger, stripped of the careless confidence that had always made her seem untouchable. "Luna, Mom told me what happened last night, what you found." "Which part? The trust fund you've been spending while I worked myself to death? Or the part where I found out I'm not actually Dad's daughter?" She flinched. "Both. Well, congratulations. You get to keep your inheritance. I hope it buys you a lot of happiness." "I don't want the money." I stopped packing and looked at her for the first time since she'd arrived. Iris without makeup was a revelation. Younger, more vulnerable, but also somehow more real than the polished version I was used to seeing. "What do you mean, you don't want it?" She sank into my desk chair, the only furniture I hadn't packed yet, and held out the envelope. "There's something you don't know, something they never told you. I think I've learned enough family secrets for one lifetime. This one's different." She opened the envelope and pulled out medical records, the pages worn soft from handling. "These are mine, from when I was 7. I recognized the letterhead, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where Iris had spent 2 weeks when she was little. I remembered visiting her there, bringing get-well cards I'd made at school, watching Mom cry in hospital waiting rooms. "You had appendicitis," I said. "Emergency surgery. That's what they told you." She held out a diagnostic report, her hands shaking. "I had acute lymphoblastic leukemia, Luna. Childhood leukemia." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat down hard on one of my packed boxes. "What?" "The appendicitis story was a cover. They didn't want to scare you, and they didn't know if—" She swallowed hard. "They didn't know if I was going to make it." I stared at the medical records, the words swimming in front of my eyes. Treatment protocols, chemotherapy schedules, remission reports. 2 weeks wasn't enough time for the whole treatment, I said slowly. It lasted 8 months. I was homeschooled for most of 2nd and 3rd grade. All those play dates at friends' houses. I was at the hospital. All those special treats and gifts. They were trying to make up for the fact that I spent most of my childhood getting poisoned with chemo. My brain struggled to reprocess 21 years of memories through this new lens. The way my parents had always been more protective of Iris. The way they'd indulged her every whim, as if saying no might somehow tempt fate. The way they'd looked at her sometimes, with a mixture of love and desperate gratitude that I'd never understood. "You've been in remission all this time? 14 years and counting." She pulled out another paper. "But Luna, look at this." It was a genetic counseling report from last year. Recent. The technical language was dense, but the summary was clear enough. Iris carried genetic markers that put her at high risk for relapse. Regular monitoring recommended. Family planning considerations noted. The doctors wanted to do genetic testing on immediate family members, Iris said quietly, to see if anyone else carried the same markers. "That's when Mom and Dad had to tell me the truth about your parentage, because you wouldn't show up as a genetic match anyway. So you've known about me not being Dad's biological daughter. Only for a year." She was crying now, but trying to hide it. "Luna, I swear I didn't know before that. I never knew about the trust fund until this week, and I never knew why they treated us so differently until I found out about the leukemia." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before. The slight hollow beneath her eyes, the way she tired more easily than other people, the frequent doctor's appointments she'd laughed off as routine checkups. "Are you sick now?" I asked. "Not exactly, but the genetic markers, they mean I'm at higher risk for relapse, especially during periods of stress, pregnancy, major life changes, financial pressure." She gestured helplessly. "The doctors recommended that I avoid high-stress situations for the next few years. The honeymoon, the perfect wedding, the way my parents had fallen all over themselves to make sure Iris's life was smooth and comfortable and stress-free. They were trying to protect your health," I said. "They were trying to keep me alive." The words came out in a whisper. "Luna, every decision they made, every time they chose me over you, it wasn't because they loved me more. It was because they were terrified I might die." I sat in silence, feeling the foundations of my anger shift and crack. Not crumble. The betrayal was still real, the hurt still raw, but change into something more complex. "That doesn't make it right," I said finally. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't, but it makes it understandable. They still lied to me. They still let me work myself to death while they hoarded money that could have helped both of us." "I know." She pulled out one more paper from the envelope. "That's why I'm signing this." It was a legal document, dense with lawyer language, but the key phrases jumped out at me. "Irrevocable waiver of beneficiary rights, and transfer of trust assets, and my name, Luna Blackwood, listed as the new primary beneficiary." "What is this?" "I'm giving up my claim to Grandma's trust," Iris said. "All of it. It's yours now." I stared at the document, then at her. "You can't do this. It's your inheritance, your safety net. It was never really mine." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "It was meant for Grandma's grandchildren, plural. She wanted both of us to have opportunities. The fact that you're not biologically Dad's daughter doesn't change the fact that you're my sister, Iris. Marcus makes good money, and he'll make even more once he finishes his residency. We'll be okay. But you deserve the chance to become who you're supposed to be." She stood up and placed the document on my desk. "I've already signed it. My lawyer says it's legally binding. The money is yours, Luna. All of it." I looked at this girl, this woman, who had been my rival, my burden, my source of endless resentment for most of my life. She was offering me everything she'd been raised to believe was hers. "Why?" I whispered. "Because you're my sister," she said simply, "and because I just found out what it costs to be the favorite child in this family." She headed for the door, then turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." After she left, I sat alone in my empty apartment, holding a document that could give me back my future. But more than that, it had given me back my sister. 3 months later, I stood in my dorm room at Northwestern, hanging photos on the wall that would be home for the next 4 years. The afternoon light streaming through the window illuminated images of my new life, orientation week friends, my roommate Sarah from Oregon, the campus in winter snow. But tucked in the corner was one photo from before, Iris and me at her wedding, both of us laughing at something Marcus had said. I'd almost thrown it away a dozen times, but something kept stopping me. My phone rang. Mom's number. We'd been talking again, carefully, like people walking on ice they weren't sure would hold. Weekly calls that lasted 20 minutes and covered safe topics. My classes, the weather, how I was adjusting to dorm life. Neither of us mentioned the trust fund, or the lies, or the night I'd walked out of their house for what I'd thought was the last time. "Hi, Mom." "Luna, sweetheart. How was your genetics exam?" It was a small thing, but it mattered. For the first time in my life, my mother was asking about my academics with genuine interest instead of distracted obligation. I think I aced it. Turns out I actually enjoy studying genes and heredity. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. That's wonderful. Your father and I are so proud of you. We still hadn't talked about Dad not being my biological father. Some conversations were too big for phone calls, too complex for the fragile peace we were building. How is Dad? Better. The shop got that county contract finally, and we're caught up on all the bills. We even bought a used car. A pause. A sensible used car. I smiled despite myself. Good. That's good. Luna, her voice shifted, becoming more tentative. Iris wanted me to ask you something. My chest tightened. Iris and I had been texting occasionally, awkward exchanges about her job at the medical clinic, my classes, Marcus's residency schedule, but we hadn't seen each other since that day in my apartment when she'd signed over the trust fund. What does she want to ask? She's pregnant. The words hung in the air between us. I sat down on my desk chair, processing. How is she feeling? Scared, Mom admitted. The doctors say everything looks normal so far, but given her history, they're monitoring her closely. She wanted to know if you'd come home for Thanksgiving. She doesn't want to ask you herself because she's afraid you'll say no. Would I say no? 4 months ago, the answer would have been automatic. But now, is she really okay? Health-wise? As okay as she can be. The pregnancy was planned. They waited until her doctors cleared her. But Luna, she's terrified that something will go wrong. And Mom's voice cracked slightly. She misses her sister. I stared out my dorm window at students crossing the quad, bundled in coats and scarves, heading to classes and study groups and normal college experiences I'd almost missed entirely. I'll think about it. That's all we can ask. After we hung up, I sat in my room and thought about forgiveness, not the instant Hollywood kind where everything is resolved with a hug and a speech about family, but the slow, complicated kind that happens in stages, with setbacks and breakthroughs, and a lot of careful navigation around old wounds. I thought about the girl I used to be, desperate for approval, willing to sacrifice everything for people who took that sacrifice for granted. And I thought about the girl I was becoming, someone who could love her family without losing herself in the process. That evening, I called Iris directly. Luna? She sounded surprised, hopeful, terrified all at once. I heard your news. Congratulations. Thank you. A pause. Are you happy for me? The question was loaded with years of complicated history, but when I thought about it honestly, I realized I was. Yes, I said, and meant it. I am. She started crying, happy tears this time. I was so scared you'd be angry or that you'd think we were being reckless. Are you happy? So happy. Luna, Marcus, and I have been dreaming about this for months. We want to be parents so badly. Then I'm happy for you. We talked for an hour. Really talked. Maybe for the first time in our adult lives. She told me about the pregnancy symptoms, the nursery plans, her fears about whether she'd be a good mother. I told her about my classes, my research project on genetic counseling, my plans for medical school. Medical school? She asked. Luna, that's incredible. You're going to be an amazing doctor. I want to work in genetic counseling, help families understand inherited conditions. I paused. Families like ours. That's perfect, she said softly. You're going to help so many people. Before we hung up, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Will you come home for Thanksgiving? I thought about it, about sitting around that kitchen table again, with all its history and complexity, about seeing my parents, the people who'd raised me imperfectly but genuinely, about being in the same room as the family who'd shaped me through both their love and their failures. Yes, I said, I'll come home. Really, but I have conditions. Okay. No one gets to act like nothing happened. We don't pretend the last few months didn't exist. If we're going to be a family, we're going to be an honest one. I can live with that, and I want to meet my biological father someday. When I'm ready, when he's ready, if he ever is. A longer pause. Mom's going to hate that conversation. Mom's going to have to deal with it. I deserve to know where I come from. You're right. You do. The next morning, I called Northwestern's financial aid office and made an appointment to discuss establishing a scholarship fund. Eleanor Blackwood had wanted her money to help grandchildren get an education. Maybe it was time to extend that legacy to other families, other daughters who needed a chance to become who they were meant to be. I thought she would have liked that idea. 3 weeks later, I boarded a bus home for Thanksgiving. Not to the life I'd left behind, but to the family I was choosing to keep. Complicated, imperfect, and finally, honest. In my backpack was a photo I'd printed. Me in my lab coat from my first genetics practical, grinning at the camera like someone who'd found her calling. I was going to give it to Mom and Dad, the first picture for their refrigerator that was truly about my achievements, not just their relief that I was manageable. I was Luna Blackwood, genetics major, future genetic counselor, daughter and sister by choice rather than obligation. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough.